Hey everybody, Brian Cox here with Fearless Purpose, and today we are talking about a very touchy, tough subject, and that is how do you come back from failure. Now, I can tell you from personal experience that you can. I have had failures, and I want people to understand this and know about them. I do not shy away from the things I've failed at. I think it's very important for us to be honest about these things, because if you are not honest with yourself, you will never, ever grow. So let's talk about a couple failures I've had. Some of them you know about, some of them you don't. So one, obviously whenever I was kicked out of school at 19 I guess, right? And how did I recover from that? And it took a long time. Whenever I was starting one of my businesses and it was an epic fail. What did I do? How did I bounce back from that? And so here are a couple of things that I found very purposeful in the way that I bounced back from those things. Number one, I allowed myself to mourn. And I don't think that people give enough credence to this, is that whenever you fail, some people are like, oh, quit your complaint and just dust yourself off and get up. Well, sometimes it actually helps to sit there and have a little bit of a mourning period. I mean, not long, not years, maybe a day or a couple days, but stop and say, man, that sucked. Like, that really completely and utterly sucked, and that's okay. The problem is a lot of people never get out of the mourning phase. They stay in mourning and it breaks them. You cannot do that. Allow yourself the ability to mourn and say, oh man, that cycle was horrible. But then you have to go into the reflection phase. Reflection is really important, where you stop and you say, why did that fail? What's the purpose? Or why did it happen? And sometimes this can be very hard. For me, whenever I failed out of school, I lied to myself for a long time. And eventually I got to the point where I understood and I really internalized why I failed, and it was because I didn't try hard enough. In the business failure I had, I tried plenty hard. The reason why I failed there is because I created something that I wanted without ever going to the market, without ever having other people see it. It's just I thought I knew better than the market. I thought that I knew better than every customer out there what they needed, when in reality they didn't need it. And then I was sitting there at the end of the day saying, well, why don't they want it? This is amazing, this is great, this is wonderful. And this had something to do with gamification, by the way. And I feel like that part of that is that the tool itself was probably a few years too early, ahead of its time, from a technological perspective, which is, hey, that's fine. But at the time it did not work at all, at zero at all. And so I had to move from there. So I mourned, and then I was reflective, and then I did something that a lot of organizations do after a project. Now they call them, postmortems, or they call them, many other things. But it's really where you sit down and you say, hey, what went really well? What did not go well? What would I do differently, and how would I move forward? And so that's what I do, is I say, hey, this went really well with this. These are learning keys I can take away that are great. Like, hey, if we do something like this again, this is something to take away, like, yes, this went well. Then what didn't go well? This did not work, this did not fly, here was the problem, here was a bottleneck, here was a struggle, here was a failure point. Make sure we never do this again. And then action steps. What are we gonna do moving forward? Do we continue with this? Do we scrap it? Do we change our strategic vision? How do we go about this? And then you have to do the next step, which is actually act. Meaning, if you're going to scrap it, boom, get it off your plate, your mind, gone, leave, go on to the next thing. It's on to the next one, right? It's a great song up there. I'm on to the next one, on to the next one. You have to be on to it. Or it's I need to really be strategic in how I'm going to move forward with this. These things did not work. Do not continue to do the things that don't work. Focus on the things that did work. These things did work, so what can I do here to move forward and to be more successful whenever we continue this down the road? But here's the thing. If you have a failure, you have to make sure you're getting past the mourning piece, but allow yourself to mourn. You have to get past the reflection piece and make sure that you are getting to the action piece, which is really about getting to the next thing. That's where you can dust yourself off, you can go through it. Yes, you might go through those 5 stages of grief, right? Yes, you might have a time where you are very upset. Yes, you might have a time where you're like, this will never work. But if that's the case, then you move on to the next one. Because what I want you to do is understand everybody potentially will fail. In fact, I will say this, and this is a tough thing to say. I believe I learned more from one really big failure in my life than I learned from hundreds or thousands of combined wins, especially whenever it was my first really big failure in business. And the reason why I say that is, you get on this path of everything you touch turns to gold, you have win, 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 and it's all great, it's all wonderful, and you keep going from there, you don't grow as much. Whenever I had that really big failure in my business with the gamification piece, I was heartbroken. Literally, I felt it like in my heart, like I was hurt because I was like, oh my gosh, I suck. I'm a failure. It's horrible. What am I gonna do? Oh my gosh, everything's gonna fail. It taught me a different way of operating that I think is so important. And I never would have gotten that if it was just continued wins. Now, yeah, I can say, hey, you know what? Would I have rather just had all the wins forever? Okay, maybe, right? But what I and my wife as well, what we grew out from that fail was we actually grew closer together in our relationship because it forced us to really evaluate where we were going, and to step back and to really effectively grow in our lives, in our business lives as well as our personal lives. It gave us a different level of humility, which I think that myself especially, I had lost somewhat over time. Failure can be an amazing growth experience if you allow it to be. So just like many things in life, are you going to let it make you, or are you going to let it break you? And I challenge everyone out there, if you've experienced a failure in personal business, etc., take the time to go through these things. Yeah, let yourself mourn. Be reflective. Why did it happen? Let yourself grow from it. Understand what you could do differently, but then pick yourself up and move forward, because otherwise you are going to have this failure begets failure begets failure, and you're going to go down into a hole. And you can prevent that. You honestly can prevent that. But you have to be self-aware, you have to be reflective, and you have to be able to move forward. So guys, I challenge everybody out there, make sure that you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and keep going, and make sure that you are living and pushing for your fearless purpose. See you in the next episode.